Today I'm going to do a deep dive into the topic of empathy, but I'm going to take it from a different approach. Hello and welcome to Sagittarius. I'm Zoe, a self-initiated witch and truth seeker, and this is my little corner of the internet, where I discuss all things occult, spiritual, and metaphysical. Thank you for joining me today on the first ever episode of this podcast. I have an interest in things like human emotions, motivations, and experiences, but they're also really incredible and fascinating areas to explore when we're thinking about metaphysics. However, modern narratives around empathy really trouble me in a lot of ways. First, we have to ask ourselves, what is empathy? Empathy is about having understanding, awareness, and sensitivity to emotions without them being spoken. The first person I think about when I think about an empath on TV is Phoebe from Charmed. She had the power to feel other people's emotions. It was a development of her skill of premonition or her ability to tell the future. She had to isolate herself. She didn't know how to create boundaries between herself and other people, and she ultimately had to bind herself from even feeling the emotions of those who were closest to her because it felt invasive. People who experience empathy feel like they have to shut down. They have to isolate themselves from others. I spent a large part of my 20s in the service industry working in a restaurant, and during that time I felt overwhelmed frequently. For me, it created a lot of resentment for people, and I felt hypersensitive to kind of like the negativity of the world. I never took account for what was mine. I would spend all of my time in my room. I would spend all of my time watching television or surfing the internet or doing something where I could block myself from experiencing the emotional nature of others because I felt like I couldn't handle it. I was running away from emotions, from feelings, from energies. I also began to recognize that when I was isolated, that I was still experiencing these negativities. And so, truthfully, a large part of them were coming from inside the house. I saw feeling emotions as a negative. But I think that there's a metaphysical element that is still missing. And that is that I believe that empathy is a gift that humans have, right? I think that it is evidence of the reality that humans are interconnected spiritually. And although we believe that we are experiencing an individual reality, the truth of the matter is that we are incredibly connected to one another in ways that we do not readily perceive and that often we readily run away from. And so when we are unable to process those emotions, we store them within ourselves and we end up creating blockages to the flow of those emotions. If we were to sit with them, process them, understand them, recognize what they mean for ourselves and what they mean in relation to those around us, then we're able to allow it to flow. And the emotive self becomes like a river connecting all of us. The emotional reality is another dimension of ourselves that when we understand is powerful, becomes incredibly key to connecting with one another. It allows us to process the traumas that have been holding all of us back for centuries, for millennia. What I think we should understand empathy as is firstly that it's an exchange of emotional energy that is inherent to our experience as human beings because we exist on multiple dimensions. We exist in multiple planes, right? And one of those planes is the emotive plane. It is the emotional, kind of what some people call soul. There is an energy to emotion. I think that if you've ever been in a concert where somebody is singing with all of their heart, you can feel this emotional energy. It's very present. But also, I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's not something that makes us a superhero. Often, and what I think people are lacking understanding of, is that when we have heightened sense of empathy, it comes from trauma. It comes from something that happened to us within our childhood that caused us to be required to have a heightened sense of sensitivity to people's emotional energies. And so whenever we are adults, we feel like we're being victimized by this because we haven't learned how to embrace it as something that is powerful. We use it as a survival mechanism, and that keeps our somatic nervous system at a constant heightened state, at a constant state of trying to perceive danger that perhaps isn't as readily there anymore. Really, what I want to talk about is how we understand this in terms of our metaphysical understandings and within our spiritual practices. So I think that we have to acknowledge within this age, right? This is the age of the sixth sun. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, where we have to begin to understand and process ourselves as beings that are not solely physical, but that have a multitude of layers and aspects. And the sooner that we can acknowledge this, the sooner that we can truly process trauma and elevate ourselves as a society, elevate ourselves as beings, as humans, as a species.